in 1836, the Church of the Latter-day Saints was returning for the Jews to return to Israel and eventually, ultimately, build our house to God.
Yeah.
I'm literally crying. You just so touched me right now. I'm the fact that that your church was praying for the Jews to return in 1830.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. Today, we are talking to Adam. I don't know if you saw that video or not, but we covered an article that he wrote, which was based off an article written by Middle East Forum that talked about the church donating up to I think it was $140 million to various charities that are linked, or in turn, they donated things to charities that are linked to Hamas. I was looking at Israel365. Adam is a journalist for them. And I saw news about the church under a section called Terror Watch. And I was like, what is going on here? So I reached out to him just to hopefully ease some of his concerns and to help him know what the church believes when it comes to the state of Israel. And he wanted to do an interview. And I thought it'd be a good idea to invite Jasmine. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with her. She used to be with Scripture Central. Now she's with Ancient America Foundation, and she has her own social media accounts by the same name on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And are you on Facebook too?
Yep. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter. I mean, wherever.
So she's everywhere. Everybody knows Jasmine. And actually, Jasmine, just a quick question. Have you been to Israel before?
I have. I did a semester at the BYU Jerusalem Center.
Okay. Yeah, because one time I was looking for one of those 360 images of the Western Gate at the Temple Mount, or on the side of the Temple Mount. And I think it was either your name or maybe it was Scripture Plus, but I was like, oh, she must have been there before. So
I'm not exactly sure what that's referring to. I haven't been there since 2013. So
that was a while ago. All right. So Adam, I wanted to start off by asking, when you came across that report by Middle East Forum, what were your initial thoughts and feelings, and like how did you feel about that?
To be honest, I felt really uncomfortable because you and I have done interviews, I think 2 or 3 times, something like that. And though I didn't have any personal contact with the Church of Latter-day Saints or any Mormons before this, we were very open and honest. And I don't see that there's no theology or ideology within the Mormons that's anti-Israel. Unlike some other faiths or communities, that there is an anti-Israel agenda and even an anti-Semitic agenda. I don't think that exists in among the Mormons. So I was surprised, but a closer look, I think I understood what was going on.
Very good. And Jasmine, I know that you looked into it and you'd gotten into some of the tax forms. I decided to do that as well, look at the 990s. But what did you discover?
Well, when I first saw the article, I thought, oh, interesting. I don't really this is not necessarily my area of expertise. So I'm sure there's just more going on under the surface. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized, okay, yeah, there's a much bigger story here, or just like a much more contextualized story when it comes to, okay, is the church actually giving $140 million directly to Hamas or terrorist organizations? No. And the article doesn't claim that necessarily, but certainly when you see the headline, when you read the initial story, the impression is, oh, the church is themselves personally backing terror organizations, or it can kind of feel like that.
Yeah.
But of course, the specific claims themselves were that Mormon Charities or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have been known to give to charities that have links to Hamas, links to terror potentially. And so there is a degree of separation there. But I also think the biggest headline, $140 million, was the thing that sounds like a lot. But first of all, I discovered that almost almost all of it, from what I could tell, was non-cash. It was in kind, so medical supplies, things like masks, things like gloves. And then the other part was most, from what I could tell, of that $140 million was actually coming from Globus Relief, which is a Utah charity, and there are members of the church who run that, but it is not run by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints officially in any capacity. So I think those are the two biggest things that kind of added a little bit more nuance to the story. I felt was most of the money is not cash going straight into the hands of terrorists, though of course we can argue about, the whole charity pipeline and how that can potentially aid terror, but it was all in-kind donations, so it's medical supplies, not cash. And then also, most of it was coming from other external, independent, not affiliated with the church at all charities, whereas the church was a smaller portion of that.
Yeah.
So those are the two big talking points that I discovered.
Yeah,
You
the
actually,
two charities that I saw, you had Globus Relief, which the article says that they gave $119 million worth of support. And then the other one was Lifting Hands International with 19.5. Was Lifting Hands International, that's also, is that separate from the church? Do you know?
Yeah. So the Lifting Hands International and Globus Relief are completely external third-party entities that are not officially overseen by church leaders or the Church of Jesus Christ institutionally in any way, from what I could tell.
Yeah. So I pulled up, so in the article,
not to be confused with Helping Hands. Sorry, not to be confused with Helping Hands. And I think that's where some of the confusion is. Helping Hands is like a service initiative that the church does in disaster relief. Lifting Hands is a completely separate nonprofit.
Yeah. So I pulled up the 990s. In the article, it talks about with Globus Relief from 2013 to 2023. That's the time window in question. And with them, because like when you look at Schedule I for the 990, it shows like there's like two columns. One is like how much was given in cash and how much was given non-cash donations, but what's like the dollar amount. And for them, they never gave any cash. And I'll give you a chance to talk here in just a minute, Adam, but let me just say this. And then with Lifting Hands International, for the last few years, there was some cash, but relatively speaking, it was pretty small. And then before, just a few years ago, it was all just things like medical supplies and stuff like that. But Adam, I don't know, does that make a difference in this whole thing, whether it's cash or whether it's like actual supplies?
Well, money is fungible. So if you're giving, even if you're giving in kind donations, it frees up money for something else that might be nefarious. Also, if I may, I think I understated something, and we kind of glossed over something that's really incredibly important to say, that the Latter-day Saints and the Mormon community have never done anything against Israel. I think it's even more important to say they've actually been a friend of Israel. And one thing that you pointed out was you also give charitable donations and help out Jewish and Israeli organizations and causes. So I don't think you're partisan. But I think if I can say anything, I think you were deceived. If I can compare it to something, when I was a kid, as a good, I wouldn't do it now, but I went out trick-or-treating on Halloween. And we had little UNICEF boxes that we'd collect candy and we'd collect money for UNICEF. As an Israeli and as a guy who served in the IDF, I see what the United Nations does. And when it comes to, I don't know about what it does in other countries, but when it comes to Israel, they actively help the enemy. So you can go out with beautiful and pure intentions, wanting to help people who look to be in hard places, and they are in hard places, they are suffering, but the money doesn't always go where it should, and the people in charge are not always looking out for the best interests of the people who are suffering. And I think that's what's happening here. The Church of the Latter-day Saints got lied to and deceived, and their goodwill was abused. That's how I see the situation. Which, I mean, you can defend yourself. You really don't need defending. You gave charity. You gave charity to Gaza, to the East Jerusalem. And these are bad actors. Uh, I saw that the hospitals in Gaza, they have more per capita hospitals than just about anywhere in the world. Why? Because Hamas does not have military installations. The hospitals were their military installations. And people gave money, gave charity for the hospitals, and that was misused and abused. And I think that's what happened to you guys.
Well, I
So,
think it's an
okay.
important point to make that the distinction between intention and result, that just because there are maybe if there were mistakes made, or maybe if they were indus super, maybe not super wise allocations of resources, that doesn't necessarily discount that there was a positive intention. I don't personally believe the church was intending to support Hamas, intending to support any
Oh,
terror
absolutely not.
organizations. Yeah. And I think some of the people who've read the article kind of came away with that sentiment that,
Uh,
like, oh, is the church intentionally trying to support these terror organizations? And I don't think that's the case, based on just like our theology, based on our trying to be nonpartisan and how we just care for the poor and needy in the world. So I do think that's an important distinction. And of course, there's a debate and a good discussion to be had about how to execute on like charitable missions of trying to do good wherever, trying to help the poor and the needy, trying to help the suffering wherever it may be, despite like whatever political regimes may be also overseeing those areas of the world. And it's notoriously hard. I mean, philanthropy, charitable giving, humanitarian work, it is so fraught because, yes, when you're trying
yeah.
to work in areas of the world where there's very complex political situations, how on earth do you ensure that you are relieving suffering without propping up a regime you don't necessarily want to officially endorse or promote or work with in any way?
Well, I think the situation is really not so complicated. There's very clear bad guys who are bad for Israel and bad for their own people. And I mean, even I have my issues with the Israeli government, but as an Israeli soldier or former Israeli soldier, you go into the field with good intentions. I was a combat medic, and you go in with good intentions. But if you look, I don't know, did you check out NGO Monitor? NGO Monitor does amazing work, and these people are very clever. So they'll learn how to channel and misuse your good intentions. So they layer the charities. It's not like you're giving to a guy who's wearing a keffiyeh and has a Kalashnikov. You're giving to people who they may have an obtuse, a multi-layered connection where if you dig long enough, you'll see, oh, that's where it's going to. It's trickling down to, and it's not so easy. And they're very clever about it. They're very clever about a lot of things. They're very clever about public relations. They're very clever about how they control the information, and they're also very clever about money. And it's like there's a person who runs an organization, and then he used to run a different organization that was connected to Hamas, and unfortunately it's about how they layer the money, and that's how they can get people to like you. And you're like, oh, we're buying band-aids. Well, okay, you're buying a few band-aids, but most of the money's actually going to another organization that isn't buying band-aids. And I think that's what happened here is they were very clever about how they funneled the money. And money is hard to track. It's fungible.
I guess
For
I guess the
sure. I
part that
know
I
at
don't really
least with
understand. Oh, go ahead, Jasmine. Go ahead.
I can't speak necessarily for the official institutional Church of Jesus Christ, but I know with Globus Relief, in light of some of the story that's come out, they have talked about how their own process of ensuring that the supplies go where they're supposed to. They never give out cash; it's always supplies. They require like receipt of delivery with like photographic evidence, and then they require detailed reports of how it was used. Now, granted, those can be deceived and you can be fraudulent in how you're reporting back to the nonprofit about how you use those supplies. But at least those were their checks that they've stated they've tried to put in place to make sure that help is going where they intend it to go.
Especially if the people in the field, um, this happens in so many different areas. Um, the only photographers who can go into uh, Palestinian towns and well, the IDF has their photographers, but they're very cagey about letting out information. for obvious reasons, because it can be used against us. But when I write stories about what happens in Judea and Samaria, in the Arab villages, no Jewish people are allowed into the Palestinian Authority. So the only images I can get were taken by Palestinian photographers who are actually working with Hamas and the bad actors. So I can't get any decent pictures. I remember once there were vicious Arab riots having to do with the metal detectors on the Temple Mount, and all I could get were pictures of Arabs praying, and I couldn't get any pictures of the riots. And it's also the same with I mean the reporting. That's the way it goes. So if you have to distribute humanitarian aid, the only people on the ground who can do that for you are working for Hamas. Hamas is the largest employer in Gaza. So it can be very deceptive.
So would
That's
your
my point.
position
What would
then
it
be
actually
that
look
it is
like what?
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so with like money being fungible, like let's say that one of these organizations they donate X number of wheelchairs and crutches and whatever, so that goes to whoever, and then what would happen? Like they would sell it to another, like a third party in it for cash, and then they would keep the cash. Is that like what you're saying?
Or they would only report, you give them enough money for 100 wheelchairs and they buy 10. And the person who reports it back. Also, it's kind of weird. Like I said, I was a medic in the army, and one time I was serving in Ramallah when Yasser Arafat, it was his last year in there. And I was a medic, and I'm a nice guy, I'd like to think. And I'm working at a checkpoint, and Palestinian ambulances had to go through the checkpoint. And I understood the emergency, the immediacy. So I would try to, like, let them get them through as quickly as possible. And I would look at them, I'm like, okay, we're working together, right? And they're like, yeah. And then one time my officer was there and he didn't let them go through, and we caught them with weapons, because ambulances are great for transporting equipment. Another time there was a huge riot, and I literally saw in front of my eyes the ambulances being used to transport people who were fighting. And then they would also, for the press, they would pick up young people who were injured, put them or wounded, put them into the ambulance, drive them away, and I would literally, with my own eyes, see them get out of the ambulance and go back out to the riot. Um, it, right, I wouldn't think of that. You wouldn't think of that, because we want to help people. We don't have this inclination to hurt. But we're dealing with people who, and Hamas runs the whole area, and they're not nice about it. They will kill their own people. So unfortunately, the people on the ground who are running it, they have no problem lying. They have no problem stealing. That you can send them money. You can even send them wheelchairs. Yeah, they might resell them. They might resell them. I wouldn't put it past them.
Well, that's the only thing that makes sense, because like based on what I saw, it seems like there's definitely a distinction between giving cash and spending money
Right.
on supplies. So I,
Okay.
I, I don't know. It just
I
like, unless they're like sell, I don't know what. Go
why
ahead.
why did you decide to give them wheelchairs in kind rather than cash? Because you kind of knew, if you give them cash, what are they going to do? You know, they're not
Well,
going to.
let me just say, when you go through the list, it's not just these different organizations like what was it, Islamic Relief and Muslim Aid. It was a bunch of like other organizations too, like here in the United States, like across the board, it's not cash, like for all these different organizations, with a few exceptions. With Lifting Hands International, for some reason there were like a few where they gave a little bit of cash, but pretty much across the board, whether it's in Israel, the Palestinians, here in the United States, it's not in
Why
cash.
why don't you give them cash? Because you know that their inclination is to misuse and abuse your goodwill, and that's really what is happening. UNRWA, you would think UNRWA, they went, like I said, collect money for UNICEF children. No, it got misappropriated, and they've had a system in place since, for years and years and years, for decades. So they know how to work it. I mean, for example, the UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Association, is the number one employer in Gaza, and they would get the money from the United Nations, and it would be in dollars, but using dollars is illegal in Gaza. They had to exchange it. Strangely enough, I think it was for shekels, for Israeli shekels, and the only people who were allowed to exchange money was Hamas. So they were right off the top getting at least 10% of the UNRWA paychecks. So they've got these systems in place where they know how to work every system, and they are using your goodwill. And like I said, you know that's the game. That's why you don't give them cash. It's like not it's like you don't give cash to a drug addict.
Well, I think it's absolutely heartbreaking and infuriating when people do weaponize empathy to actually fuel and funnel their own political agenda and ideology. I mean, these are lots of people who are feeling sympathy and empathy for people who are suffering, wanting to give. And then if systems take advantage of that, that's terrible. It is absolutely awful. But I mean, I think we've come on a very important point that yes, so far, the vast majority is in-kind donations, not cash. But there are still weaknesses to that. People can still resell supplies in order to fund their own activities. Or as you said, if their people are getting aid, then that's something they don't have to spend money on. Therefore, they can spend it on other things. So, but that I think kind of gets to the heart at some of the moral dilemma that Christians who feel a need to help the suffering in every part of the world. Every country has suffering. Every country has poor and needy. And we want to help as many as we can as possible. So would your position be that it is not possible to provide relief to suffering in a place like Gaza without propping up the regime?
God forbid. God forbid. Otherwise I give up hope. There's an interesting question. I don't think this applies to the Latter-day Saints at all. But I think there comes a point at which the bad actors are so, I mean, they don't even hide anymore. And if you continue to help them, you're complicit. And I don't think that's the case with you at all, at all, at all. And I don't think you were entirely foolish or naive, which is why you gave most of the aid in kind and not in cash. But UNRWA was absolutely complicit, and we even have videos of actual UNRWA people murdering Israelis on October 7th. An absurd percentage of UNRWA workers were in Hamas, and I think they were turning a blind eye. UNRWA and the United Nations were turning a blind eye, or they approved of it, and that's already a problem. And I don't think that's the case with you. But there comes a point at which ignorance becomes complicity.
And I think that's absolutely something that anyone in the humanitarian space needs to be aware of and be so diligent in guarding against. But at the same time, I don't think that as Christians, we feel a spiritual compulsion to relieve suffering and all of that, no matter where it's coming from. The church is very nonpartisan. They don't try to get embroiled politically. And yet I don't see the little searching I've done, it's been hard for me to find a way to support any kind of Muslim charities or humanitarian aid that really doesn't have any kind of link that can support a regime. And yet we still feel like it's a Christian duty to still help where we can. Same thing for Israel. Like the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints donates to causes that relieve suffering in Israel as well. And so that's just an ethical dilemma that I think a reasonable person could take either side on. And I don't know, I think there's a decent argument either way that okay, we need to relieve suffering. If you feel like giving to any kind of charity that has any link to this area of the world is going to be complicit in the harm they're causing, then I think that's a reasonable position you can take. And if you're someone who says, yes, but I still want to help where I can, even though I know there's a domino effect somewhere, heck, I think there's a domino effect of using paper straws instead of plastic straws, even though that's heralded as use paper straws instead of plastic straws because it's better for the environment. Well, there's a whole industry that could potentially cause harm down the road too. I mean, it's just, I have a hard time, I should say, I'm sympathetic to people who have good intentions and are trying their best. And I do think we need to be ever more diligent in how we're vetting our charities. We need to be more diligent in how we are executing our humanitarian intentions. But at the same time, I have an inclination to give a lot of grace to people who are trying to do good in the best way they know how,
Oh,
knowing that every single system on planet Earth is going to cause harm in some way.
absolutely. Grace is an amazing thing, and grace is a gift that you can give yourself. But I've been blessed to know a few philanthropists, very wealthy people who you wouldn't know they're very, very wealthy, but they give a lot of charity. These guys are smart, and they're even a little bit hard. They're tough. And unfortunately, we're living in a world where you have to be, if you want to do good, and if you want to really bring good into the world, you have to be very smart and you have to be tough. Otherwise, it'll end up not doing good. And I think that's what we're looking at here. The unimaginable level of evil that some of these people are capable of, and they take your goodwill and they manage to they're like, they don't take it and say, oh, how can we help our people, which would be the smart thing to do. Oh, we got 100 wheelchairs, how can we help our people? They're sitting there going, oh, we got 100 wheelchairs, how can we get some more rifles, how can we dig more tunnels? We were, Gaza was destroyed. By the way, I was there, okay, in Gaza, 1995, okay. And it was gorgeous. It's on the Mediterranean, it's the best surfing in Israel. And it was destroyed, so we started sending in, and the United Nations started sending in concrete and everything to rebuild. And what did they do with it? You would never think that they would look at people living in tents and be like, oh, or living in destroyed buildings, like, oh, we have to help them. No, that's not what they're saying. And you have to be smart. And I've seen UN sacks holding mortars and hand grenades and weapons, and UN sacks that are supposed to hold food. You have to be, unfortunately, smarter and cagier, and even think a little more, like, how would these evil people treat this?
I have a question. So I don't know actually the inner workings. I know one of the main charities that have been in dispute was Islamic Relief. And I know that obviously they have a lot of involvement in Palestine, Gaza. One thing I wonder is most of the involvement I was able to track with both Globus Relief, Lifting Hands, Church of Jesus Christ was in things not in the Middle East. So things like relief for the hurricane in Haiti many years ago, relief for flooding in Pakistan, relief for people in the United States just through that charity. So does it make a difference where that relief is actually going? Like if Globus donated medical supplies to Islamic Relief that then gave those medical supplies to a flood in Louisiana, is that still supporting
I
terror
I
in the
will
Middle East?
I won't pretend to know, but I will say this. It seems like, and it seems like when you track NGOs, their NGOs, they're wonderful, they're beautiful until they get to Gaza, until they get to Israel. And then all of a sudden, these wonderful, beautiful people, they start aiding and helping Hamas, literally. And maybe it's because Hamas, they're in charge. So if you want to do any good, you have to work with them. Or maybe they just don't like Israel. A lot of that could be the optics. And a prime example is Doctors Without Borders. They do lovely work all over the world, and we have videos of them transporting Hamas terrorists. A lot of the food that was going in, they use the jeeps. You see the terrorists in the jeeps that these organizations have, the NGOs have. Also, a lot of people, they want to do good, and they've set up, oh, Israel bad, Israel's evil, and then anything they can do against Israel, they'll do. That's not you guys. But for example, there's that watch. They're Europeans, and they would go around Hebron, and they would just all they were looking for was cases where Israeli soldiers seemed rough with the Palestinians, and it's not really so cut and dried. It's not so black and white. Sometimes you have to be rough with the Palestinians, and sometimes if you're not rough with them, you're actually going to end up having to shoot them. And I'd rather yell at them and try to and say, okay, you can't go there. And I'd rather be even nasty rather than get to the point where they're going somewhere that's really dangerous for me and I have to shoot them. And God forbid, I was trained very well. I was trained to be tough. It's not my nature. Um, and I think that's also with there are some of these organizations that they come in with good intentions, but they've set it up as this binary Israel bad. So they can be wonderful, wonderful humanitarians somewhere else, and they come to Israel, and all of a sudden it goes off the charts. Either that, or I'm kidding myself, and Israel really is evil, and I'm on the wrong side. But I sincerely don't think so. I sincerely don't think so, especially in this case.
So when it
Um,
comes to our church, I don't know what your perception is because, like you said, you didn't really know much about our church until we came in contact. So I don't know what the typical Israeli Jew thinks about our church, if anything at all. But I guess I just want to make clear, what we believe about the state of Israel. And do you have any inkling of that or where we stand?
Um, I have a very dear friend who actually worked with Mormons in Israel, and I asked him about it, and he said, it's the only branch. I don't know if you exactly consider yourself Christian. I'm really not so clear on that. But
We
he
do.
said they're the only. Okay, phenomenal, amazing. I'll go with that. He said they're the only branch of Christianity that's never tried to convert us or kill us. And I was like, wow. and something considering Jewish history, that's really saying something. And and we have a nice history with BYU, with Brigham Young University, that goes back a long way, and we appreciate people who are willing to be with us in our land.
Yeah.
Um, not
Yeah, I
everyone
mean, it may
is.
not come across this way because you have a lot of other Christian denominations that are like, really actively supporting like the Temple Institute, or, you connect with a lot of Christians through Israel365, and we may not be as prominent as them. But theologically, we do believe that there's supposed to be a state of Israel. We also respect the rights of those that lived there before. Um, but it's interesting because it kind of goes back all the way to the beginning. Right now, you're waiting for the third temple, right? And we're all expecting at some point there to be a temple in Jerusalem. In our church, we believe that temples have come back. In the first temple that was constructed in these times, what we call the last dispensation, it was the Kirtland, Ohio temple. And every temple has a dedicatory prayer. And this one we believe was given by revelation, and it's become part of our scripture, like one of the chapters of our book of scripture called Doctrine and Covenants. And in the dedicatory prayer, there's a part that talks about, I just want to read it just really quick, just so you see how it's worded.
I'm fascinated.
So this is verses 62 to 64. This was a prayer given by Joseph Smith, which was the first prophet of our church. We therefore ask thee to have mercy upon the children of Jacob, that Jerusalem from this hour may begin to be redeemed, and the yoke of bondage may begin to be broken from off the house of David, and the children of Judah may begin to return to the lands which thou didst give to Abraham their father. So with that first temple built in this dispensation, like that was part of the prayers for the Jews to begin to return to the land. And then that was back in 1836. And then in 1841, one of our 12 apostles was sent to Israel specifically to dedicate the land for the return. His name was Orson Hyde. And that's where we get this. I don't know if you know about it, but on the Mount of Olives, there's the Orson Hyde Memorial Garden. Have you heard about that before?
No, no.
Yeah, there's a memorial on the Mount of Olives called the Orson Hyde Memorial Gardens, and it commemorates his trip, which back then it was really difficult. It took him a while to get there, and my understanding is that he got sick along the way. But he went there specifically to dedicate the land for the return of the Jews, and not just him. BYU put out a paper, which is really interesting. Let me see if I can pull it up here. It's called "In the Footsteps of Orson Hyde," and this was the first time that I learned that there were multiple apostles sent in the subsequent years that were sent to dedicate the land, going from the first one was 1841 with Orson Hyde, going all the way until 1933 with Jay Whitsoe. But there were looks like maybe about 5 or 6, maybe 7 trips that were made. So, and then in addition, in 1845, we believe the Lord commanded to put out this proclamation. So in our church, we have so far, there's 6 official proclamations. The most recent one was given in 2020. But the first one was to the British saints in the early days of the church that had just recently converted, asking them to, hey, will you guys come gather to the United States and join the main body of the church? But the second one was like to the whole world. And there's a part of it. Sorry, I just want to read this as well. I just want to make it really clear, like where we stand when it comes to the state of Israel and the Jews gathering to the land. But there's a part of it that says, we further testify that the Jews among all nations are hereby commanded in the name of the Messiah to prepare to return to Jerusalem and Palestine and to rebuild that city and temple unto the Lord, and also to organize and establish their own political government under their own rulers, judges, and governors in that country. So, and there's more that I could say, but from the very early days of the church, we've held the belief that the Jews are supposed to gather in, right, make aliyah to Israel. And so that's why, like when I saw that article, I'm just like, maybe there were mistakes made, but the church is not like taking the sides of Hamas against Israel, like whatsoever. Well,
I should clarify that the church pretty diligently, maintains political neutrality. So when it comes to, they're not going to take a position on the infrastructure of the state of Israel or certain political actions of the state of Israel. They're never going to take a side on that versus Gaza, Palestine, whatever it may be. But you're right, Jared, that at its core, we do believe in that it's been prophesied that Jews will return to their homeland at some point.
Yeah. And mostly, I think when it comes to the Jews returning to the land and prophecy being fulfilled, the Lord can do his own work, and he can also just interact directly with the Jews, and it's between him and them, and we know how things are going to play out. So it's like, I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about Israel being destroyed. I'm not worried about there being a temple there someday. It's not even a question. And so, you and I have talked before, Adam, about other Christians. A lot of them want a temple there because they believe that there's supposed to be this like antichrist figure, because they interpret certain scriptures to mean like, oh, it talks about a temple and how the antichrist is going to be in the temple, and so, oh yeah, we need to help build the temple. But that's not part of our theology. We do believe that there's supposed to be a temple, that like a temple that will remain through the 1,000-year period, right? The final redemption, the Gula, and it's going to be there forever. So it's just that's like what we believe.
You guys were praying for us to return in 1830?
Yeah. No, well, that was 1836. I'm sure that there were probably conversations before that. So the church was established 1830. The Kirtland Temple was constructed, or it was dedicated in 1836. That, as far as I know, that's like the first official like command or revelation in our church for the Jews to return to Israel. 1836, as far as I know.
In 1836, the Church of the Latter-day Saints was returning for the Jews to return to Israel and eventually, ultimately, build our house to God?
Yeah.
We generally, Latter-day Saints have a distinctive view that we actually consider ourselves part of the house of Israel in a metaphorical sense, and in somewhat, we feel that by partaking in, we feel like we partake in Abraham's covenant in a very real way. And so we feel a very strong kinship with the children of Abraham, the house of Israel. We believe that when we join the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we're becoming adopted into that covenant.
Or some even literal, not that you can like prove it with like genealogy, and not in the Jewish way where it's like, if you have a Jewish mother, then you're Jewish. But a lot has to do with, we know about the Assyrians that came in and took the northern kingdom captive, and where are they? And I believe they're mostly all around the world, and they've lost their identity, and for all intents and purposes they've become Gentiles, but God still knows who they are. And so when I was talking to Rabbi Gerfine, he said, and I don't know if there's like different opinions about this in Judaism, but he talked about Elijah, how since Elijah has always been around, he knows everybody's lineage and everything's going to be sorted out, I think, in the Messianic age. And I guess, we think that there is something similar like that going on where they receive a patriarchal blessing, is what we call it, and it declares, which tribe you're part of. But that's just what we believe, and I'm not trying to like really share our beliefs, but I'm just trying to say we're not against Israel whatsoever.
I'm literally crying. You just so touched me right now. I'm the fact that your church was praying for the Jews to return in 1830. I have no words. I mean, considering what we went through in Europe and what, and what happened before and what happened after, the fact that there was a church praying for Israel, I have no words.
We have a fundamentally different view, I think, when it comes to Jews, like when you look at other Christians, because we still view the Jews as a covenant people. Like that hasn't gone away. They're still a covenant people. And so it's the concept of Israel and being a chosen people. We do believe that you can join Israel, like you can be baptized into it. Essentially, it's like a full body immersion in a mikveh. It's a baptism, is what we call it. But that Israel is meant to last forever, like as a people in tribes. And Judah's not like cast away, going to hell. Like you still have to obey the commandments and everything. But
which was most of Christian history with the replacement theology.
Yeah,
which is that we were on the outside and we had been replaced. I really have no words. I mean, there's politics and there's news reporting and stuff. I never would have published this article. I didn't write it, by the way, but I'm kind of responsible for the news that goes out. And I saw, and other people wrote about it. But I mean, I got your back now. Anyone who, you guys were praying for us. You were praying for us. No one was praying for us. It was us against the world. And now, wow, that was a beautiful, if you could send me that verse, email me that verse, and the source. And if there are any other sources, I mean, I've got a lot on my plate. I got a lot of books to read, a lot of stuff to do, kids to raise. But so, and I mean, your church, I mean, it's not one of the bigger, well-known churches, and it's distinctly different than other branches of Christianity. But I had no idea, and that is so exceptional. I have no words, and now I understand why Brigham Young University ran to Jerusalem so quickly, to bond with Israel.
Yeah, it's super
we feel
important.
a very spiritual call there. A lot of Christians like making pilgrimages to the Holy Land to feel like they can walk where Jesus walked, but and see the world of the Hebrew Bible as well. But Latter-day Saints feel a very particular kinship to the Holy Land because there's not just what happened in the past, but what we believe can happen in the future, and we believe that Christ will come down and have a second coming, and Israel will play a major part of that. And we have a great love.
Also a kinship to the Jews too, because of persecution. Not that we've received like even a fraction of what you have throughout history, but since the church was established, it's been just nothing but persecution. And especially here in Missouri, where I'm at, because you and I have talked about how we think that there's going to be a new Jerusalem someday here. And when the church was first here in the 1830s, before the Kirtland Temple, like 1831, 1833, they tried to build that city and they tried to build that temple, but the church was driven out, first out of Jackson County, where I'm at in Independence, and then out of the state altogether. As far as I know, and I'm pretty sure about this, there hasn't been any other religious group in the United States that had an extermination order signed by a governor of the state against them. The governor of the state of Missouri back then, Lilburn Boggs, he signed an extermination order. It was legal to kill us if we didn't leave the state. And so we've had a lot of people that have died here. There's a famous incident called Hans Mill where 17 died. Like I said, it's nothing compared to what the Jews have experienced. But like we've been driven from Ohio, Missouri, and then we were in Illinois for a while in a place called Nauvoo, and driven out of there. And we had to go all the way across the plains, all the way to Salt Lake, which at the time wasn't part of the United States, but we were driven. And it's interesting because Salt Lake City, it's almost like an upside down map of Israel, because there's the Great Salt Lake, which is a terminal. It's a terminal lake. It's like the Dead Sea. It's not as
I was just gonna say we have a Salt Lake too. Yeah.
Yeah. There's the Jordan River, like our Jordan River that connects Utah Lake, which is like I only know it as the Sea of Galilee, but I know it goes by another name.
Kinneret. It's called the Kinneret.
Kinneret, yeah, right. Anyway, it's really interesting. But we feel very, very close to Jews. We really do, for so many reasons, but it's really baked really deep into our theology.
Okay, now I feel like I absolutely have a requirement to write an editorial about the article that I shouldn't have published. More on my plate. Okay.
Well, there's always I appreciate the opportunity it's given me to just learn more about the philanthropic nonprofit space and how we really always can do better at trying to vet and do better. And I do think in this case, I mean, one thing that I've noticed in this conversation is like Latter-day Saints are usually very careful to distinguish the official Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from members of the church who do stuff. And I recognize that distinction doesn't always exist across other religious traditions, because we tend to be a very centralized church. We have an institution, and that institution controls very tightly, curriculum and what happens. And so when we see like, oh, these external nonprofits were donating to these churches, well, they have nothing to do with us. They're not us, but they were members of the church. Whereas like because I know from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Judaism is not highly centralized. If we were to see, oh, there are charities run by Jewish people, and you say, oh, that's a Jewish charity, that would make a little bit more sense. But for Latter-day Saints, calling something a Mormon charity when it's not run by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints just like feels completely different to us. Like if there's a nonprofit doing bad stuff, throw them under the bus, put them in jail, stuff like that. But even the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, like, yes, we can always do better. We can always vet more carefully. What I would love to see is, so I know that the church, they don't work with any charities that aren't already approved through COGAT or, Israeli authorities. And they use a charity navigator to help them vet. I imagine they also have other additional vetting ones. I would love to see COGAT highlight some of these concerns that these media outlets have about Islamic relief, about Muslim aid. And if those aren't approved through Israeli authorities, like, let's address that. Let's, go through those government agencies and departments to see if we can have better vetting there, so that other nonprofits who want to do good can have some more of that information that would be useful in their decision making.
Yeah, first of all, I'm stunned. You clearly did far more than your due diligence when it comes to vetting these. I think that's also because if you've been giving humanitarian aid and charity to organizations, you're going to smarten up really fast, because you're going to be dealing with people who want to abuse that. And that's what happened here. But I don't see any culpability here. Israel, we're used to being so much on the short end of the stick, so demonized, that we don't really explain. Like, we just shut down UNRWA. We just shut down the NGOs that we catch them red-handed. And unfortunately, sometimes, like, we have no choice. If there's a Jeep that says, the name of some NGO, and it's transporting terrorists on their way to carry out an attack, well, we're going to have to blow up a Jeep that belongs to an NGO. And that's happened. And so we're very heavy-handed because we don't have many options. But I do have to write an editorial response to the article that went out on Israel365. I would like to get a copy of this video, and because you've explained to me how you've done your due diligence, and it's really it's wonderful. I mean, sometimes, like I said, when you have people giving millions and millions of dollars, and it's so clear that they're giving it to an organization that's one step removed from Hamas, and I don't think you people did that. But there are people who they kind of like, oh yeah, I didn't give it to Hamas. Oh, didn't you really? And I don't think that's what you folks did at all. And now that I'm hearing how much you have vetted your aid in the past, it's clear that you did your due diligence at least, and then some.
Well,
Wow.
I think that it is very like, if I had just like a closing statement, the church tries its best to be politically neutral and help as many people relieve suffering, but they also completely condemn terrorism, and they try very hard to vet partners in the Middle East. But we can always do better.
Yeah.
Sure. And you can't just sit by and watch what's happening in Gaza and saying, I'm not going to help those people because it might get to Hamas. You have to help. I mean, even Israel, you have to help. Wow.
Well, thank you for joining us, Adam and Jasmine. It was a pleasure to talk to both of you and just have a really good conversation. It's always a good conversation whenever Adam's on the show.
You made me cry.
So anyway, everybody, make sure to check out Israel365 and also make sure to subscribe to Jasmine. Her channel is called Jasmine Rapley. I'm going to put a link for it in the description box below. But that's going to be it for this one. We'll talk to you guys later.